From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Amarachi Ubani.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight, Supreme Court temporarily halts the enforcement of central bank's February 10 deadline of the naira note swap pending the determination of a notice in respect of the issue on February 15. Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami asked the Supreme Court to dismiss suit challenging the Central Bank of Nigeria's redesign policy. More reactions to the Supreme Court's ruling. Governor Nyesom Wike vows that River State will join suits by Kaduna, Kogi and Zamfara states against the federal government. An INEC chairman affirms general elections will hold as scheduled, says fears over logistics and security challenges now allayed after his presentation at the Federal Executive Council.
On Sports News tonight, Los Angeles Lakers power forward LeBron James eclipsed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the most prolific scorer in NBA history after breaking a 39-year-old record.
Abuja, the nation's capital, no more adjustments. The schedule for the collection of permanent voter cards, INEC declares, says there is no cause for worry over claims that the BVAS could be compromised.
And in international news from London, Turkish president visits earthquake disaster zone in his country as death toll rises to over 11,000.
Out of the blue, but in what many consider an easing of tension, the Supreme Court today restrained the federal government from implementing the February 10 deadline for the old naira notes to stop being legal tender. In a unanimous ruling, a 7-man panel of the Supreme Court, led by Justice John Okoro, granted an interim injunction pending the determination of a notice in respect to the issue on February 15. Kaduna, Kogi, Zamfara states filed an ex parte motion on February 3rd, asking the Apex Court to halt the Central Bank of Nigeria's naira redesign policy.
The Supreme Court is filled to its capacity with lawyers as the court entertains an ex parte motion filed by 3 states, namely Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara states. The states are challenging the February 10 deadline of the Central Bank of Nigeria when the old 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 naira notes are expected to lose their status as legal tender. They maintain that the 10-day extension by the federal government is still insufficient to address the challenges trailing the policy. Moving the application, counsel for the applicants, Mr. Abdul Hakim Mustafa, urged the Apex Court to grant the application in the interest of justice and the well-being of Nigeria. Mr. Mustafa held that over 60% of Nigerians who do not have bank accounts do not have access to cash, and the number of citizens who do have accounts cannot access those accounts, as most of the banks have closed operations because of the policy. In its ruling, the Apex Court held that after a careful consideration of the ex parte motion, the application was granted as prayed. It made an order of interim injunction restraining the federal government through the CBN or the commercial banks from suspending or ending on January 10, 2023, the time frame within which the now older version of the 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 naira notes may no longer be legal tender. The Apex Court held that this would be in place pending the hearing and determination of the applicant's motion on notice for interlocutory injunction.
We invoked the powers of the Supreme Court to hear this application. The reason for it is that as well-intentioned as this policy of federal government of redesign is working hardship all over the country, as we can all see, banks are being harassed, Nigerians are suffering needlessly, especially the downtrodden. Those in the urban areas, they're having problem, but it's more excruciating at the rural area. So these three state governments, Kaduna, Zamfara, and Kogi, deem it fit for us to invoke the powers of Supreme Court to intervene.
The court, in its wisdom, decided that something must be done because of the urgency. But the court has acted rightly in its own wisdom, directed that all processes must be there by 15th, that is Wednesday next week, for us to argue our various positions.
The court subsequently adjourned to February the 15th, 2023 for hearing of the substantive suit.
It does appear the Supreme Court ruling has not gone down well with executive arm of government, as the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, is asking the court to dismiss a suit challenging the naira redesign policy of the CBN. In a preliminary objection filed by the AGF through his lawyers, Mahmoud Magaji and Tijani Ghazali, the federal government argues that the Supreme Court lacks jurisdiction to entertain the suit. In court rulings dated February 8th, the AGF contends that the plaintiffs have equally not shown reasonable cause of action against the defendants. They're asking the court to strike out the suit for lack of jurisdiction. Citing grounds in support of the objection, they argue that the state government's suit challenges the federal government through its agency, the CBN, to withdraw old banknotes from the financial system and introduce new ones. With reference to Section 251 of the Constitution, the defense lawyers argue that the suit falls within the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal High Court in matters of monetary policy of an agency of the federal government. Our senior advocate of Nigeria, Chief Mike Ozekome, has been reacting as well to the Supreme Court ruling, calling on Nigerians to hold their peace as the court is yet to decide on the matter. He said this on our program, The 2023 Verdict.
The Supreme Court has not decided the matter. All it has done is to fall back to a decision like Kotoyo versus CBN, that in matters of extreme urgency, you can grant an interim order, even if it be ex parte, to prevent the subject matter of the suit being truncated. If, for example, the Supreme Court does not make that order, or did not make that order, and the only order existing is that of the High Court, it means that the CBN, by 10th of this month, will stop the use of all old notes. But what the Supreme Court has said is, just wait. Let us listen to you people. Not that it has decided that Zamfara, Kogi, and Kaduna states have any valid case that is actionable, because the action is already being challenged with a preliminary objection. It is another way of saying, let us first drive away the fox before we blame the fowl for wandering too far into the forest. So it has not decided. It has just left the matter in a state, what we call status quo, ante bellum. Let it just remain now until we hear you people. Nigeria is a captured state. Nigeria has been captured by non-state actors, by the elites, rich individuals. There are some individuals that are now richer than Nigeria. Of our 21 trillion naira current budget, is it not only about 8 trillion that we can say in terms of revenue? The rest is to be borrowed. So Nigeria is borrowing her future and future generations to the 10th generation.
Staying with us, we have more reactions now coming from the River State Governor, Nyesom Wike, who says the court has saved Nigerians and democracy by the decision. River State Governor also commended the governments of the 3 states that filed the suit, vowing that the state governments will join the suit against the federal government. Governor Wike said this during the state's PDP campaign in Awa Odwa local government area, where he urged the people to preserve their PVCs to vote for the PDP candidates at state level.
I have said before, this democracy can only survive with the support of INEC, with support of security agencies, yes, sir, and with the support of judiciary. With what happened today, the Supreme Court has shown that the hope of the common mind lies in the judiciary. And let me commend my brother states, like Kogi State, like Kaduna State, like Zamfara State, who took it upon themselves to go and challenge the federal government and the Supreme Court. I also want to say River State government will join them in that suit to challenge what the CBN is doing. We will not support anything that will do against the masses.
Meanwhile, the Central Coordinating Council of the Coalition of Civil Society of Nigeria has criticized a court order restraining the CBN from implementing the naira swap deadline. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the national coordinator of the coalition, Mr. Obed Okukwe, said the coalition is opposed to moves by some politicians capitalizing on the temporary challenges of the implementation of the naira redesign policy to make it look like an anti-people policy.
The Central Bank of Nigeria should, as a matter of fact, join the suit and file urgent preliminary objection on the jurisdiction ground so that the apex courts can vacate this order, while Nigerians who have not deposited their old notes should avoid that had I known and go to do so immediately. This order is only designed to help politicians with sharing of old money during elections. We also call on the President, our dear President, to exercise his constitutional powers. We may suggest that he should make an urgent executive order to set the terminal date for the new currency to remain 10th February 2023.
As the current scarcity of the naira notes takes its toll across the country, bank customers in Lagos metropolis have continued to vent their feelings on the impact it's had on their livelihood. This next report takes a look at the challenges faced by some Nigerians as a result of the cash crunch.
It's less than 48 hours to the end of the extended deadline by the Central Bank of Nigeria for the validity of the old higher denominations of the country's currency. But right here, some bank customers are finding it difficult to withdraw money from the automatic teller machines after waiting for several hours in queues from various banks. Some even to the point of exhaustion. While some bank customers were unable to get cash from the ATM, others are lucky to receive the lower denominations at one of the banks with available cash.
3,000 naira on the counter, which is 5 naira, 20 naira. This is it.
I've been standing here for the past 2 hours, and I've not actually found it funny to get either the old notes or the new notes. Even with the POS standing, I've almost been to 4 banks, and I've been to like 4 POS stands. It has not been easy getting the old notes and the new notes.
I was lodged in a hotel. I couldn't pay the manager because of the situation, and I feel weak, distressed, sick because I don't know where money will come in.
However, some bank customers were delighted to withdraw a substantial amount of cash dispensed from the ATM of one of the new generation banks.
The ATMs are not dispensing cash. Then at the counter, if you go inside the bank, if you are a account holder there, if you go inside the bank, like some banks are giving 3,000, some are generous to give us 5,000. But only one of these banks, like where we are standing here, at the ATM, you can get, if you have an account there, you can get 20,000. And if you go in as an account holder, you can get 20,000 at the counter. But it's only that the crowd here is overwhelming. The day before yesterday, I was here, somebody's number was 670 something. So we were here tonight, but they've organized it so well for us that if you are patient enough, you can get money.
Meanwhile, with the order on Wednesday by the Supreme Court calling for the suspension of the CBN's deadline for swapping of the old to new naira notes, it is expected that the current tension it has caused will disappear in days to come.
In part two, after the break, political campaigns get more intense. 16 days to the commencement of the 2023 general elections as various parties continue to sell their plans to Nigerians across the country. We'll have that in a moment. Welcome back. If you just joined us watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Supreme Court temporarily halts the enforcement of Central Bank's February 10 deadline on the naira note swap, pending the determination of a notice in respect to the issue on February 15. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, asked Supreme Court to dismiss suit challenging the Central Bank's naira redesign policy. More reactions to the Supreme Court ruling. Governor Nyesom Wike vows the River State will join suit by Kaduna, Kogi and Zamfara states against the federal government. And Turkish president visits earthquake disaster zone in his country as death toll rises over 11,000. Following yesterday's protest in Ogun State over scarcity of the new naira notes, Governor Dapo Abiodun has again called for calm in the state. He made the appeal when he paid a visit to the Federal Medical Center near Abeokuta, the state capital, where a young man who was shot during the protest is currently recuperating. It was gathered the victim, Gabriel Michael, was shot while the police attempted to protect bank workers from being manhandled by the protesters.
Your governor is doing everything humanly possible at this time. We've spoken to Mr. President, we've spoken to the governor of Central Bank, I've been to Central Bank, I've met with the bankers. And you can see the situation is evolving positively. Please, I've met with the royal fathers, I've met with ballers. Please bear with us. We cannot resort to violence. Breaking banks, looting banks, breaking ATMs will not solve the problem. You will only create fear in the hearts and minds of the bank staff, and they will not want to open the banks. So even if there's supply of cash in the banks and the banks are not open, you will still be just as frustrated. So please do not take it out on the bankers. The money is not there. The supply is the problem.
We switch gears now to political campaigns. The presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, is congratulating the people of Kogi State and Nigerians over the Supreme Court ruling on the currency swap impasse. At the APC's presidential campaign rally in Lokoja, the state capital of Kogi State, Senator Tinubu said those who wanted to take advantage of the situation have failed. He promised that if elected into office, he will ensure revival of the Ajaokuta steel complex in the state.
It's the turn of the people of Kogi State to host the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress, Senator Bola Tinubu. party supporters in the state gathered for the rally at the Confluence Stadium, where Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State criticized members of the opposition who he believes want to take advantage of the current situation in the country to secure votes.
Some few elements decided to make life unbearable for our people by ensuring that the scarcity of naira and kobo. By the special grace of God, our leader, our father, the next president, took a lead and made his stand known to the whole country.
Kogi State is one of the 3 states that filed a suit against the Central Bank of Nigeria over the deadline for the implementation of the new naira policy. The APC candidate hails the verdicts of the Supreme Court on the suits.
Let me now give you an assurance. Those who are telling you that they are the other party, I don't want to mention their name. They even rejoice when you cannot sell your product.
With an assurance of the best deal if he is elected president.
You've seen your hope. Hope is here. Ajaokuta is resuscitated and will be done. Amen. Dredging of River Niger will be done. Amen.
On his plans for Kogi State, resuscitating the Ajaokuta still is a priority for the presidential candidates. Senator Tinubu lauded the crowd for turning up for the rally, asking them to repeat the same on the day of the election.
Meanwhile, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, is pledging to provide security, reopen schools, empower youths and women, as well as reopen borders to ensure businesses flourish. He was accompanied by his running mate, Governor Ifeanyi Okowa of Delta State, and other party leaders when he stated this in Damaturu, the Yobe state capital, at the party's presidential rally in the state.
The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Atiku Abubakar, is received by members of the state chapter of the party at the Muhammadu Buhari International Cargo Airport in Damaturu, the Yobe state capital. The delegation later proceed to the August 27 stadium, where he is received by supporters. He promises to reopen closed schools and borders, as well as empower youths in the state.
Do you want peace to return to Yobe? Yes. We promise you, if you vote for PDP, peace will return to Yobe. And we will make sure that our schools are open so that our children will continue to go to school. We also promise to empower our young men and women by giving them capital so that they can set up businesses, so that they can also live successful lives. Do you want that? Do you want that? Therefore, vote for PDP. How many of you will vote for PDP here? You want your borders reopened? Yes. We promise you we will reopen these borders so that businesses between our neighbors and our country can flourish.
The campaign council urges residents of the state to come out en masse and vote for the party's presidential candidate.
Our appeal to you is that these numbers and many more shall translate into votes. Come out en masse and vote on the 25th of February for Atiku Abubakar and Okowa and all members of the National Assembly.
You have made a statement today that you are ready to reclaim the future of Nigeria. The Nigeria that we dream about. Not the Nigeria where we go to bed hungry. Not the Nigeria where everyone is suffering.
People's Democratic Party is confident that votes will count, believing that the necessary technology is in place to combat any plot to rig the process.
An ADC government in Ogun State will bring about a positive and impactful change in the lives of all the people it voted into office. That's according to the governorship candidates of the African Democratic Congress, Barrister Olubiyi Otegbeye. He was addressing a crowd of party supporters during his campaign tour of Obafemi Owode local government area of the state.
The African Democratic Congress ADC governorship candidate in Ogun State, Barrister Olubiyi Otegbeye, is forging ahead in his statewide campaign tours as his running mate, Olatunde Awonuga, and the entire campaign team are in Obafemi Owode local government area of the state. The two-day tour of the local government touched political wards, including Adigbe, Shiun, Ogunmakin, Oba, Ajura, and Obafemi Owode. Others are Igbeyin, Ibafo, Arepo, Magboro, Mowe, Ofada, and lastly, Owode, headquarters of the local government. In some of the communities, the people waited patiently with much anticipation and joy till the evening to receive the ADC governorship candidate and his entourage, who has never hesitated in telling the people about his readiness to give them quality leadership.
I have encouraged everybody to go out and obtain their PVC. This is not a time to neglect it. Go out, obtain your PVC, and then let's begin to knock on the doors of our neighbors and tell them that ADC is set to fix all the rots in Ogun State.
The Hausa communities are also not left out as they openly declare their full support for the ADC candidate.
He really is our candidate because Senator Bukule Amiso is our man here. He's a part and parcel of this community. So anything he said, we know his word is already followed. So we are really together with Bukule Amiso. We are really together with this governor. Inshallah, he will be crowned as a governor by God.
All the citizens of Obafemi Owode local government, especially the farmers, we are solidly behind BOT.
As the decision day comes in about a month from now, the Ogun ADC governorship candidate hopes to see the love expressed by the people translated into massive votes for him on election day.
Still ahead on the news at 10, IMF completes Nigeria's economic health assessment, urges removal of fuel subsidy as it asks the CBN to extend its deadline for naira swap. We'll have more in business news. Do join us again. Welcome back. We'll continue with politics now. The presidential candidate of the Accord Party, Mr. Chris Imumolen, is urging the youth to support and vote for one of their own at the presidential polls later this month. According to him, only young people in power can ensure that youths play a major role in the decision-making process. Speaking at a campaign rally in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, Mr. Imumolen told his supporters other candidates have no plan for the youths, as evidenced by their actions in the past, which have plunged millions into poverty.
Nigeria is a great country, but we have been so unlucky with good leaders. Nigeria is a country with great youth who has great potential, but for too long we have been so unlucky to have good leaders. God has blessed Nigerians with various mineral resources. As I speak to you, we have more than 500 mineral resources. Many are yet untapped. God has blessed us so much. But many a time we ask ourselves, is it a cost to be a Nigerian? Because we live in a country that leaders do not care about those that they lead. So it is very important that Nigeria must see the 2023 election as an election that is about our life, an election about the livelihood of our parents, an election about the education of our children, an election about the reduction of hardship of the economy. Professor Chris, myself, stand in this race as the youngest presidential candidate, as the most educated presidential candidate, as the most charitable educational candidate.
More electoral matters now. It's 16 days to the commencement of the general elections, and the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has affirmed two major issues considered to have posed major challenges to its operations during the elections have been resolved. For this reason, INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, has given assurances that the elections will hold as scheduled. In a chat with State House correspondents after briefing the Federal Executive Council on preparations towards the elections, the INEC boss said the relevant authorities have allayed his concerns on the petrol scarcity and the cash crunch. Our State House correspondent, Gloria Omizuke, has more.
The Federal Executive Council, presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari, makes its first official inquiry into the state of preparedness of the Independent National Electoral Commission for the elections, scheduled to hold in about 2 weeks. So it's no surprise as the INEC boss is invited to the council chamber. In a chat with correspondents later, Professor Yakubu demystifies areas of concerns ahead of the elections.
The Commission is invited to brief Council. It is also invited to brief the Council of State. The briefing for the Council of State is going to take place on Friday the 10th. So we took members of Council through all the preparations that we have put in place for the election and the few challenges that we are facing and the steps that we have taken to address those challenges. I can tell you two of these challenges quickly. The first one is availability of petroleum products. We had a meeting with the National Union of Road Transport Workers, and they raised that as an issue of concern. Immediately after that meeting, we interfaced with the leadership of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. So we raised those challenges, but we have found a solution to those challenges. So be rest assured that the election will hold as scheduled on the 25th of February for national and on the 11th of March for the state elections.
Hours after, the Minister of State for Petroleum corroborates the adequacy of petrol in the country. However, he blames the marketers for the pump price hike.
The Ministry of Petroleum is not in control of all the factors that lead to scarcity, in the sense that there are forex issues as well and other issues. But we have reports of profiteering by marketers, and I've directed NMDPRA to sanction anybody who profiteers on this kind of situation.
By the same token, he announced that the council approved the award of contract for the construction of the Oloibiri Oil Museum and Research Center for the sum of 117 billion naira. A 30-month contract, he says, will be a major legacy of the president in the Niger Delta. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
And here's Gloria with more on the news at 10. Hi, Gloria.
Thank you, Amarachi. Well, staying with the conduct of the general elections, INEC says it will no longer adjust the schedule for the collection of permanent voters' cards in the country. But this position was made known by a national commissioner, Mrs. May Agbamuchi Mbu, during a public hearing organized by the National Assembly Committees on INEC on the extent of implementation of the 2022 Electoral Act. Meanwhile, INEC is allaying the fears of some Nigerians on whether the BVAS can be compromised. Our National Assembly correspondent Terry Ikumi reports.
It's almost a year since the 2022 Electoral Act became effective. Since then, off-season elections, including 2 governorship elections, have been conducted using the new law. The National Assembly believes that as the general election approaches, it is important to ascertain the extent of the implementation of the new electoral law. That explains the reason behind this public hearing.
You will agree with me that this is a turning point for our nation.
a time to test our democracy through a seamless and peaceful democratic transition.
Civil society organizations, international observers, and representatives of political parties make their observations and recommendations to the electoral umpire.
The hope we all have is that elections will hold as scheduled. The situation in the country is challenging for all of us, but what will help to reduce the tension and challenge that the country is faced with is the holding of the elections as scheduled.
People are worried. A recent case that's gone through to the Supreme Court. You know, the judiciary has to be, the rule of law is the foundation of all democracy. Democracy doesn't exist without the rule of law. We need the judiciary to stand up, to be independent, and there's quite often a lot of pressure on the judiciary.
The Electoral Act has some lacunae that has been exploited by the judiciary. We are all aware that even though the portal for electoral processes have been closed, courts are still giving conflicting judgments regarding candidates in this election, including some candidates that did not even participate in primaries that have been imposed on INEC as we speak. One of them is your president here.
The electoral umpire responds.
The views cannot be compromised because what we have ethical hackers who we use periodically to check the beavers, and I'm confident that we will not have issues regarding the beavers being compromised. And then the distribution of PVCs, yet again, it is a Nigerian problem. We have 1 year to collect your PVCs. People don't come. If we continue to move the timetables each time, we'll never have an election in this country. And we must appreciate that this country should move to greater heights, and it starts with the elections.
While the electoral umpire assures of its readiness to conduct free, fair and credible elections, civil society organizations fear that voter apathy and disenfranchisement could be recorded due to the difficulties being experienced by registered voters in collecting their permanent voter cards. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
We return to legal matters where the Court of Appeal Abuja has dismissed a suit by the Allied People's Movement seeking to disqualify Mr. Peter Obi as the presidential candidate of the Labour Party. Delivering judgment, the president of the court, Justice Monica Dongban-Mensem, dismissed the appeal on the ground that it lacked merit and the APM lacked the legal right to initiate the suit. The appellate court also awarded a cost of 200,000 naira against the APM in favor of the Labour Party and Mr. Obi. Meanwhile, the court has also declared Mr. David Jimkuta as the validly elected candidate of the All Progressives Congress for the forthcoming Taraba South Senatorial District election. A three-man panel of the appellate court, led by Justice Haman Barka, set aside the decision of the Federal High Court, Jalingo, which dismissed Jimkuta's suit, challenging his substitution with the name of Mr. Jumadu Danjuma Shide. Delivering judgment, Justice Barka held that the primary election that produced Jimkuta was conducted by the National Working Committee of the APC and was valid in accordance with the relevant laws. The panel held that only the National Working Committee of the APC has the powers and the rights to conduct a valid primary election for the party. In other legal matters, a senator representing Delta North in the National Assembly, Senator Peter Nwoboshi, is finally in prison custody after he was intercepted by operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, at a hospital in Lagos yesterday. In a statement, the EFCC explained that the senator was remanded in Ikoyi Custodial Center today to begin his prison term. Senator Nwoboshi had been on the run for months after the Lagos Division of the Court of Appeal convicted and sentenced him to 7 years imprisonment for money laundering amounting to over 800 million naira. The Court of Appeal had, in a judgment on July 1st, 2022, sentenced him to prison after convicting him of a 2-count charge of money laundering and also ordered the winding up of his 2 companies and their properties forfeited to the federal government. The lawmaker was said to have gone underground and instead approached the Supreme Court asking it to not only set aside the judgment of the appeal court, but to grant him bail. However, in a unanimous decision on January 27, 2023, the Supreme Court dismissed the application, berating Senator Nwoboshi for refusing to submit himself to the law, but at the same time seeking the assistance of the law. Meanwhile, the EFCC today arraigned one Mr. Ali Bello, said to be a nephew of the governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, before Justice Obiora Egwatu of a Federal High Court, Abuja. A statement by the Commission's spokesman, Mr. Wilson Uwujaren, says Bello was docked alongside Abba Adauda, Yakubu Siyaka, Iyada Sadat, and Rashida Bello, who is said to be at large on an 18-count charge bordering on criminal misappropriation and money laundering to the tune of over 3 billion naira. The defendants pleaded not guilty to all the charges preferred against them. After listening to the counsel, Justice Egwatu adjourned the case till February 13, 2023, and ordered that the defendants be remanded in a correctional center pending the determination of their bail application. Well, that's it from the nation's capital. It's over to you, Anne, for business news.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Gloria. Hello and welcome to Business News. We begin with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, asking the federal government of Nigeria to deliver on its commitments to remove fuel subsidy by June this year. The Washington-based lender made this known in a report following the completion of its 2022 assessment of the country's economic health. According to that report, Nigeria has missed out on the opportunity to reap the benefits from higher global oil prices for the year 2022, and the fund says decisive fiscal and monetary tightening is needed to secure macroeconomic stability. The IMF also recommends decisive and effective monetary policy to avoid the anchoring of inflation expectations. Meanwhile, the IMF president's representative to Nigeria, Ari Essien, has encouraged the Central Bank of Nigeria to extend the February 10 deadline for the naira swap if problems persist in getting the new notes. According to him, this has become necessary considering the hardship caused by disruptions to trade and payments due to the shortage of new banknotes, in spite of measures introduced by the CBN to mitigate the challenges in the banknote swap process. We head straight to the equities market now. It made a quick rebound today in trading sessions. Investors' eyes on stocks of markets on Dangote Cement. Let's hear the details of this from Inijon Megwa.
Thank you so much. Welcome to the stock market report. Well, investors' buy interest has set the market on the recovery path just one day after a pullback. And so we see the all-share index gaining at the close of Wednesday's trade, gained 0.23% and still hovering around the 54,000 there. We hope it stays there or it moves further to 55 to be good to see that. And market cap at 29.64, still right there. And this was highly driven by industrial goods counter because Dangote Cement gained 5 naira to close at 270 naira for one share. That's some gain. So we see the industrial goods counter up almost 1% in the green there. Consumer goods not so good today. And banking was a mixture. All the big guys, the GT Core, the UBA, they had the plus and the minus, and that led to that. Now, looking at the activity chart for today, a lot of red. In fact, all red. And then we see, I think one of the heartbreaking ones is value went from about 4 billion or so to 1.81 billion naira. And of course, the deals less than the usual 4,000, 5,000 that we normally see. But all of this did not stop the bull from resurfacing. So we hope that this bull maintains this position even at the close of trade tomorrow. But we'll see how that goes. That's the stock market report. I'm Inijon Megwa. Back to you.
Thank you, Ini. Well, let's see closing numbers from other major markets around the world. And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawodo. The rest of the news at 10 continues now with Amarachi.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot. And Turkish President Recep Erdogan was in the earthquake disaster zone of his country today, having faced criticism over the government's response to the disaster. Some families in some badly hit areas say the slow speed of the rescue efforts means they have had no help digging through ruins to find relatives. President Erdogan acknowledged there were difficulties initially, but blamed delays on damaged roads and airports. Meanwhile, activists say supply is not getting fast enough to Syria. Teniola Oyetayo has more in Around the World in 5.
Good evening from the Channel studio in London for your international news Around the World in 5. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has visited the earthquake disaster zone in his country as criticism grows over the official response. Families in some badly hit areas have said the slow speed of rescue efforts means they have had no help digging through ruins to find relatives. President Erdogan acknowledged there had been difficulties with the initial response, but blamed delays on damaged roads and airports. More than 11,000 people in southern Turkey and northern Syria are now known to have been killed. Dramatic rescues have proved rare glimmers of hope, one of a young Syrian boy who smiled and started to play with rescue workers who pulled him from the rubble of a building after being trapped for hours. In Idlib, crowds erupted into cheers as a family of 6 were rescued and ushered to waiting ambulances. Three days since the disaster struck, rescue workers from around the world and charities warn that time is running out to save people as temperatures continue to drop in the region. Meanwhile, officials say a huge fire at one of Turkey's main ports has been extinguished. The blaze at Iskenderun on Turkey's Mediterranean coast was caused by Monday's earthquakes that have devastated parts of the country. Hundreds of shipping containers had caught fire, sending an enormous plume of dense black smoke into the sky. According to the Defense Ministry, military helicopters and planes were used to help bring the fire under control when fighting the flames from the land and sea did not work. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made a surprise visit to the UK in his second trip abroad since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. With Kyiv warning of a looming major Russian offensive, President Zelensky and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak discussed how best to defend Ukraine from Russian assaults and secure Kyiv's military strength in the medium term. Addressing a joint session of the UK Parliament, the Ukrainian president vowed to defeat Russia and also made a plea for fighter jets from the West.
We know Russia will lose. And we really know the victory will change the world. And this will be a change that the world has long needed.
He also met King Charles at Buckingham Palace as part of the surprise visit. It's Zelensky's first visit to the UK since Russia invaded his country and his second international trip since the war began. Members of an international team investigating the downing of flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014 say they have insufficient evidence to launch any new prosecutions.
The investigation has now reached its limit.
According to investigators, there are strong indications that Russian President Vladimir Putin decided to supply the missile that downed the flight, killing nearly 300 people. However, the prosecutors say they have exhausted all leads and cannot continue with any more criminal proceedings. Russia has always denied any involvement in the downing of the plane.
New Zealand's Navy has intercepted a floating haul of cocaine in the Pacific Ocean in what the country says is its largest drug bust ever. The stash, weighing a total 3.2 tons and worth 500 million New Zealand dollars, was found drifting hundreds of kilometers northwest of New Zealand. Police believe it was destined for Australia, where it would have been enough to serve that market for a year. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Many thanks, Teniola. Welcome to Sports News. LeBron James has soaked up the reaction from the crowd, his teammates and his friends as he surpassed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to become the NBA's all-time points record holder. It will be a feat that would once and for all cement his position along the NBA greats. The LA Lakers power forward was visibly emotional and touched by the feat. In football, Tottenham Hotspur are set to be without goalkeeper Hugo Lloris for 6 to 8 weeks after he suffered a knee injury in the 1-0 victory over Manchester City last Sunday. The French goalkeeper suffered the problem in Sunday's 1-0 win over the Citizens and will spend a sustained period on the sidelines. The Belgian Football Federation appointed Italy-born Domenico Tedesco as the new head coach of the country's national team. Tedesco succeeds Roberto Martinez, who stepped down after Belgium failed to qualify for the knockout stages at the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. And the Belgian Football Federation says his initial contract will run until the Euro 2024 Championships in Germany. PSG have commissioned an American company to study the possibility of building a new stadium after the city's authorities and Parc des Princes owners said they were against selling the ground. PSG have played there for almost 50 years, but Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo said in January the stadium is not for sale and will not be sold to the Qatari-owned club. And that's Sports News. I'm Ayotunde Balogun.
Thanks a lot, Ayotunde. And the main news again. The Supreme Court today temporarily halted the enforcement of the central bank's February 10 deadline on the naira note swap, pending the determination of a notice in respect of the issue on February 15. Also, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, asked the Supreme Court to dismiss suit challenging the central bank's naira redesign policy. The AGF made the request in a preliminary objection filed through his lawyers. That is the news at 10 tonight. Thanks for watching. I am Amarachi Ubani. Good night and stay safe.